I think we're going to start right now, actually, because I have to bolt in a very short time. I have to leave early today to get ready. We're doing a special event today with our choir, and so I have to leave before 9 a.m. to get into my costume and all that fun stuff. I'm going to be a king. Anyway, so I'm gonna kick this off, and then Alan's going to take over. And with any luck, more people will show up because I always show up late. And so he'll continue the conversation that I'm kind of initiating here. So well, yeah, that's so my long sleeves wouldn't show under the costume. Anyway, okay, so what I want to talk about today, I mean, it's the continuation of this thread of personification, right? And so just think about the power of the human mind. It's pretty mind-boggling. We can do some amazing things, but paradoxically, there are certain things that aren't really that hard that we struggle with. And a vivid example for that is compute the square root of 13 to 10-digit accuracy. You think that's a hard problem? Well, that's a trivial problem. I mean, any junky little calculator you buy at Target can do that in a fraction of a second, and it's a tiny little chip inside that actually does all the work. So, but our brains aren't good at that stuff. Our brains are not great at arithmetic and logic and stuff like that. Now, engineers like me get rewarded fairly substantially for overcoming those limitations to some degree, but any computer would look at my math skills and say, pathetic, not bad for a human, Likewise, a cheetah would laugh at my foot speed, or even Usain Bolt's foot speed. I mean, he once hit 27.8 miles per hour, but a cheetah can hit 70. So now, if you look at what I just did there, I personified a computer and a cheetah. And I think you all understood me. Now, a few of you may have thought, wait a minute, cheetahs don't laugh. And some of you may have thought, computers don't have egos that need to puff themselves up. So computers didn't say that either. But still, you understood what I mean by that. And just personification is one of our mind's default moves. It's what we go to all the time. It's probably why we personify God and the weather and everything else. It's just the way we think about complicated processes is with personification. So humans are slow sprinters compared to other animals on Earth, and we're slow at arithmetic compared to microprocessors. But what are we good at? Well, we're good at endurance running and understanding other minds. Personification is our superpower. It's computationally a really hard problem that we do amazingly well with our highly portable brains. Once we learned to talk to each other and to make projectile weapons, we were safe from the cheetahs and practically every other animal on Earth. We were successful hunters, even though we were slower than our prey, because we could coordinate our activities. And we could just run for hours until our prey collapsed from exhaustion or fell into a trap or an ambush that we had set for them. Even better, right? So none of this required us to compute the square root of 13 to 10-digit accuracy. Our brains evolved to solve the problems that confronted us thousands of centuries ago, not ones that we made up just a few centuries ago. But those intellectual gains that we made up relatively recently begat technologies that provide me with gainful employment. Hooray! But today, math, science, and technology are matters of life and death. They power the rise and fall of billionaires, like scam, bank run, fraud. Technologies enable military and economic competitions, but those are all built on anticipating what our adversaries and allies are thinking. Military or various kinds of industries, a lot of that is key to the whole process, negotiating, figuring out who's doing what to whom and why. So this thinking about other thinkers is really our brain's superpower. It's what it's best at. I mean, what is the square root of 13 is not the start of a friendly conversation. However, what's on your mind is. That's a vastly harder problem. What's on your mind? That should be like a horribly intimidating and awful question to throw in someone's face. And yet we're fine with that, right? Okay, what's on my mind? Well, I must confess that I know. But I didn't know that you knew I knew. I think you all understood that if I got the inflection right? Think about how complicated that is. I mean, we're thinking about a world, we're thinking about the world, and the world contains other minds that know different things about the world. So I've got my map of the world, and you've got your map of the world, and your map of the world includes your assessment of my map of the world, and on and on and on. Why does that not make our heads explode? But our brains evolved to handle that. But if you look at the logic problem of people have either red hats or white hats or blue hats, and people have either green, black, or gold T-shirts, and somebody with a red hat can't sit next to someone with a green T-shirt. You know, those logic puzzles, we suffer with those. I mean, we really have to write it down and figure it all out. But actually, that other minds problem is probably harder. But it's what we were built to do. It's what we evolved to do. And so that's really key to understanding how we perceive the world and how we model the world. I mean, you think about all those different reference frames and all that stuff. That's a much harder problem, but it's something that helped us understand the behavior of other people. Helped us survive 100,000 years ago and right now. So naturally, that's what our brains are good at, and when we use our brains to do other stuff, we may or may not be particularly good at that other stuff. Now think about the golden rule. The golden rule assumes we know what it would be like to be the other person, right? That's foundational to it. And yet we assume any kid can follow that. Treat others as you wish to be treated. So we know what it would be like to be that person. Oh, you were mean to Johnny. How would you feel if you were Johnny and someone did that to you? Every little kid understands this intuitively. We get that. Now, I mean, I'm sure there are, you know, some pathological conditions where people have a total lack of that understanding of other minds, a total lack of empathy, and that's tragic. But it's also very rare. Society works because to a vast degree, we do know what it would be like to be the other person, and so so that's really what makes things work. And society functions best when we endeavor to understand other people's view of the world and not just our own, right? So a local example, I think about theory of mind in terms of computational complexity. Who does that? I mean, what's wrong with me? I mean, it's a very odd way of looking at things, you know, and I compare that to my son, Tommy, who's a psychologist. He understands people a lot better than I do. And if he were talking on this same broad topic, it would sound a lot different. But I think, you know, we each give what we can, and hopefully the community is better off for that effort. We each contribute our piece of the puzzle. So when I was in Boy Scouts, I was taught to always leave the campsite better than we found it. And I think that same advice applies to, you know, planet Earth, our time here. But the golden rule and understanding and appreciating other people is key to attaining the goal of leaving the planet a little better than we found it. So it really, this personification and thinking about other minds is really core to what religion is all about, or ought to be all about. Yeah. So thank God for the human mind. Now I believe that, but it feels funny for me to say it. Oh, yep. Yeah. Oh, we're back now. Okay. Yeah. So the thing is, I mean, I recited rote prayers all the time growing up in the Catholic Church and all that stuff, but just expressing my own feelings in those terms, it feels a little funny. And I kind of wonder, well, why, why is that? Well, there may be a lot of, personal psychological reasons for, why I feel the way I do about various religious things. Huh? Oh, yeah, because for you, that's your native tongue, right? Right. And I intellectually think, well, that's perfectly okay. Yes, I'm okay with that, but it doesn't come naturally to me. It feels strained to me. And I think the underlying problem, I think that I worry about the ways in which that can trip us up, the ways in which personification of God can actually lead us to wrong ideas about the way the world works. And so here's like one vivid example. I said it last week, but because of weather and stuff like that, not everybody was here, and so I'm gonna repeat it again. I think it gets to it's a good example of the core of this thing that I struggle with a little bit. During World War II, there was a woman who was expressing. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So there we go. so during World War II, there was a woman who was expressing her joy and relief that her son had survived when the ship he was riding on got torpedoed, and it went down, and lots of people died, but her son was saved, and so she was expressing her joy at this to her Unitarian minister, and she said, and I knew he would survive because I prayed for him every single day. And the minister said, do you honestly believe that God let those other boys die because their mothers were insufficiently pious? Now, I don't think he was taught to do that in seminary. I mean, that's not really the way you're supposed to nurture the flock exactly. But it makes a very powerful point, very personally and very vividly, I think, that if you're going to give God credit for saving him, how do you not give him the blame for killing all those other poor guys? What the hell's the deal with that? And I mean, and long before I heard that particular story, I mean, I think we've all had this little thought experiment probably in one form or another. All it would have taken, for God to prevent the Holocaust was a little brain hemorrhage, a little burst blood vessel in Hitler's brain before all of it happened. Doesn't need to be a lightning bolt out of the sky, nothing that flashy, right? Just something that subtle could have taken one life and saved 6 million or a lot more than 6 million other lives. Now, if a police officer has an opportunity to kill someone who's got an assault weapon and is spraying a crowd with bullets, obviously he kills that person. That is the moral thing to do. It would be immoral not to, right? Absolutely has to do that. But God's off the hook. God didn't have to, so either he didn't have the power to do it, or he was bad, The thing is, I just think that mischaracterizes God. That's a way in which God should not be personified. It's just a wrong model for what God is. We've got ample evidence that God doesn't mess with, that God doesn't pull the strings on the puppet show to make things come out exactly the way he wants every single time. So also, I have a compelling reason to think that God acts some other way. We've got gravity, electromagnetic field, destroying weak nuclear forces. That's what actually drives the physical world. So the miracle is persons, minds, and our ability to interact at that level. So the thing is, I think we have to encompass a God that is all of that. That is all those dispassionate forces and randomness and all that other stuff that's in the universe. And also this mysterious thing of free will and volition and deciding our paths and deciding to be good or bad. I mean, I think that's
to me, that's a real, that is a gift and a burden, right? I mean, having that capability. So the fancy name for this is theodicy, this, justification of the existence of evil and all that stuff, right? Now, so smart people have lost a lot of sleep over that, but I don't, because I just think the scientific explanation works. It explains what's going on, and therefore all these things are possible, good things and bad things. I don't blame a man named God for hurricanes and floods and whatever. I mean, it's just the laws of nature. It's fluid dynamics. It's chemistry and biology. Viruses happen, for their own reasons in a rather mechanical way. And so so the thing is, I don't have a problem with that whole theodicy thing, but some people think I'm cheating. Fundamentalists would say, well, you're just an atheist, so that's no fair. You've let yourself off the hook. But on the other hand, if the atheists hear what other things I believe, then they don't want anything to do with me either, right? I mean, I kind of don't fit in either of those little camps in that simplistic binary. It just doesn't. I have a non-binary theology. Borrowing a term from pop culture right now in a totally different context. Yeah. So so the thing is, I mean, Christian tradition says that God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and we have this problem. Well, how does 3 equal 1 and all that? But the thing is, there's also a gender-neutral version of that, which is Creator, Incarnate, and Holy Spirit. And I kind of like that one because it gets away from the one and only Son. Incarnate could be a broader idea than that. But also, and then the Creator, I just have to flip that and make it a non-person. Creator is now the creative force. It's gravity, electromagnetism, and the strong and weak nuclear forces, and everything that flows from that, chemistry and biology, and all that other good stuff. So to me, that works. And yes, we just sit with the mystery that this spirit. I mean, yes, we're all bound together by gravity and electromagnetic fields and stuff like that, but we're also, and chemistry and all that. But we're also bound together by a shared spirit. Our individual spirits, in a certain sense, come together in a collective spirit. And that's kind of mysterious. I mean, we can't well, okay, it's in some way manifested in the mind, but we can't exactly map from that to mind, to brain, to neuron, to to ions jumping across a gap. I mean, there's a lot going on there. So in our current state of understanding, we just have to sit with the fact that this part is a mystery. But I think to me, that's a sensible way to sort of synthesize the problem and put the pieces together. And so I've actually talked about my Trinitarian Universalist creed in a previous program here. So I don't know if people remember that, but yeah, so that's a whole other subject. But it's but I mean, I think it works for me. So so what do you think? Any resonances there? Any thoughts? Any other viewpoints? Yeah. Is it? Well, and I guess that's one of the things that I wonder about and worry about, and this is probably a whole other program. But what? And I touched on this last time at the end about the various attempts at monotheism that didn't work. And Plato and Pythagoras and all those guys had a certain version of monotheism, but it was probably a little too intellectually austere, and it just didn't take off. And Zarathustra's original version also, with his monotheism, didn't really take off until other people grabbed a hold of it centuries later and did other things with it. So one thing I wonder about is with our church and all Christian churches, how do we make them more relevant? I mean, one idea is to be more scientific, more rationalistic, stuff like that. But does that really work? Or is that emotional aspect of it really core to the whole thing? So I'm probably not the person who can figure out how to reformulate that. I can figure out what works for me, but it's a more complex problem for the whole population, right?
Like you think very differently than I do.
Right.
But the thing is, we should all be welcome in the church. We should all be able to, it's not that we have to buy into every single little thing that people get into. So anyways, I
Right.
just think you've got to just adjust for the fact that people think differently.
Right.
And that's not bad. God made them that way.
Right. And so that's where, my always my theme, universalism, there's and that kind of competes with strident monotheism, right? The kind that Akhenaten tried to do, get rid of all those other gods. They're wrong, they're false, and only this. And we're so steeped in monotheism that it's hard to question it, really. And I talked about this last time, but I think to be really universalist, to be really embracing of all these different viewpoints, it's kind of necessary to say, okay, I can't be there, the referee ready to whistle as soon as you step out of bounds. Oh, sorry, you crossed that line. No, that's not allowed. That's not allowed. I think, and it's easy to say, well, my theology says exactly this. And if you deviate from that, you don't believe you believe in the wrong God. I think that's not healthy or helpful.
And yet sometimes when we sing a song of praise and worship to God, I mean, it can just be overpowering to me and very emotional. And I don't understand it. And I really don't know. I can't give you any of those answers you brought up today. But there's something there that I want to praise God and thank him for the good things and wonder about the bad things.
And along with you right now, just down the road from you, I'm singing the same songs and I'm having the same emotional experiences. And they somehow sit side by side in my brain. And so I can sing words that I wouldn't be happy saying. It's a funny thing. Yeah. And so I guess it's just, what is it, like 5? I guess we've just about got to take off now, you and I, don't we? So, well, thanks a lot. And I've got a whole bunch of other fun topics about personal, how we personify and fun things like that. And so I guess Alan's going to take over, and sorry we don't have a larger turnout to help keep things going. But...
No problem. Before we start, why don't you go over here, Pam?
Okay,
Just talking to this microphone.
before you guys go, 1 second. I just, our next meeting, we're not meeting on Christmas or New Year's. So our next meeting is January 8th. And I just wanted you guys to know that our speaker will be Dr. Stanley Jordan, who is a surgeon at Cedars-Sinai. What?
He's a pediatric nephrologist.
I was,
He tells surgeons what to do. Sorry. Go ahead.
he is a transplant surgeon, among other things. He's worked on transplants. He is, as Alan said, and I was going to tell you, a pediatric nephrologist. And he recently has been working on COVID and immunology. And I don't know for sure which of these many topics he's going to talk about, but it will be something very interesting. And he's really great. He's our neighbor across the street.
Super. Thanks. Thanks, Bill. Hey, we're looking forward to your show. So I really got thinking about our tendency to personify. And it's a fascinating, almost feels, it's probably a kind of hardwired feature of the way our brains work. Some psychologists many years ago decided to do an experiment in which you had very simple things happening and in a movie, say, or in a computer animation, and then ask people to explain what had happened. They'd have a blue ball sitting on a table, and a red ball would come and touch the blue ball, and then they would wait a certain number of milliseconds and the blue ball would go away. So if you do in 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 milliseconds, say what happened, people say the red ball hit the blue ball and it absorbed the momentum and charged off, was forced off. If you have the red ball come in and it waits maybe 70 or 100 milliseconds, it's not long, but it's long enough that people would then say, there we go. People would then say, oh, the blue ball is made of something kind of rubbery. And so when the red ball hit it, it absorbed the force and then rebounded. Okay, so that's interesting. But the really weird thing is, if you come and wait a whole second and then it goes off, the blue ball decided to move after being hit by the red ball, people would say. So here's this thing, which nobody thinks it has a mind, and yet nonetheless, to try to explain what has happened, we come up with this story that it made a decision to take action. It's just a lump. So we're going to try a different microphone. Thanks. So the scary thing about this is, gosh, maybe our personification of God makes no more sense than our personification of the blue ball. This may fit in with some of what Bill was getting at. One of the things that always comforts me once we get into these notions of, gee, is there really a God or anything, is that even if there isn't, it may be good for us to think so. We may act better and we may be happier. We may do more good things together that help ourselves and other people. Bill's got a number of topics that he thought we might want to talk about. And actually, maybe that's an even better idea. Why don't we reflect on some of the things we've been doing here in the last 2.5 weeks, since we're halfway into this session of ADG. Originally, we talked about this discovery of a temple that was built 2,000 years before agriculture began, and the amazing fact that people were willing to gather here, even though it was physically bad for them. In other words, there was perhaps some spiritual benefit that they were willing to pay significant economic costs to benefit from. So organized religion may have preceded agriculture. And then we've been talking about personification a lot and how that relates to our theories of religion. I wonder if anyone present would like to make an observation or a challenge or a topic that's related to this that they'd like to have us think about together. It could be someone present out there in space, if there are any. If not, does anybody have any reactions or alternative ideas to this personification discussion that Bill's been leading us? And I think, Mary, you've just brought up a good point that we're a big tent, so we can have different theories about and different ways of experiencing God, and it's all acceptable here. Many religions teach that our spirits survive the death of our bodies. This is presumably a subset of the religions that believe we have spirits. Probably are religions that don't think of us as necessarily having something separate from our bodies. So a lot of ancient peoples seem to have thought that when they dreamed, they may be more in touch with the spirit world than when they are awake. And nowadays, we sometimes wonder whether dreams are a side effect of brain housekeeping while we're resting. So maybe it's purely epiphenomenal. We shouldn't overinterpret it or think it means too much, which that would have ruined Freud's gig, because he went a long way with the interpretation of dreams. So what do we think? Are dreams a window into our minds?
It's what's going on in there. And a lot of times you'll have dreams that are somewhat related to reality, not directly related, but you can tell where they're coming from.
Absolutely. And have you ever awakened from a dream in the middle of the night and thought, that's it, and written something down that was completely uninterpretable when you woke up in the morning? But yes. Yes. Maybe it's a reflection of your subconscious.
Right. Because, I mean, we all think differently. That's what makes the world so much more interesting than if all of us are the same, it will be so dull.
Yes, so true. Jim.
Your mind does not stop working when you go to sleep, I think. And especially those things that are bothering you, those things that are nagging at you, and you are having trouble solving. You tend to think, well, I tend to think about those kind of things
Yes.
when I have no control over it,
Yes.
being asleep.
Although I also sometimes find that a dream makes me realize that I'm still thinking about things that I thought I moved on from 5 years before. And it doesn't have to be a big, it's not like necessarily a bad thing. I sometimes wake up thinking about designing software with my colleagues, and I haven't done that for 8 years or something now. Yeah, I miss it. It's fun to solve problems, and working together is fun too. So Bill also, Bill points out that some people think dreams are a window into another facet of existence, something almost like thinking of an alternate dimension or something. I have trouble making use of that idea, but I know some people have gotten very excited about it. And then there's the question of whether people who are meditating, or some people like Saint Teresa of Avila, the famous mystic, when praying, can enter into an alternate state of mind. And might that be related to dreams? It might be, but I think it's another thing that's not like dreams, but it's also very interesting. Hallucinations, that's actually another, I think that may even be a third state of mind that, or fourth, I guess we're saying now, that is interesting. And some people, of course, take hallucinogenic substances as part of a religious experience. So I think they're typically achieving something a little bit different from what you achieve through, what might achieve through meditation or prayer. But if you approach it in a mind frame of reverence, that too could be a religious experience, I'm sure. So Bill points out that some religions, this isn't I think, so much the Judeo-Christian tradition, but in some religions, our spirits are thought to have existed before our current incarnations, and that after we die, some of our spirits may inhabit non-humans. So there's a whole karmic notion that you're unpleasant and grasping and greedy, you may be a cockroach in your next life or something. I've known some people who grew up in a Christian tradition, although not necessarily a particularly doctrinaire one, who wound up becoming quite convinced of the rebirth of the soul. And have any of us had intuitions that we've been here before? I'm on my first go round too, I think. But yeah, if you do it right, in this life, you won't have to come back. That's a good theory. And in fact, I think some of those traditions which do believe in rebirth believe that when people attain a sort of transcendent state, then they're out of the cycle, the unending cycle of suffering. And then, and this idea seems tangential a little bit, but someone else may want to relate to it. Should the industrial raising and harvesting of animals be viewed as ethically different from hunting and fishing? Yes. No, I'm not talking about trophy hunting, but rather if someone is a hunter-gatherer, then hunting is not a sport, although, like other fields of human endeavor, it has its challenges and rewards. But one aspect of being in a hunter-gatherer culture is that the animals you hunt get to lead a natural existence, an existence in which they get to live the life that they're genetically programmed for. Now, we have to admit that modern cows and sheep would not do so well if turned free in the wild, probably, because the cows have all been bred out of the aurochs so that they have short legs so that they can't jump over the fences. They're pretty big legs, but the aurochs is even bigger. And the sheep have been modified so that they weigh 3 times as much as they did 2,000 years ago. You ever think about this paintings of Christ with the sheep, the good shepherd with the sheep over his shoulders? That was very doable back when sheep weighed 40 pounds. Now that they're 300, it's you've got to be a power lifter. So is it more ethical to be a subsistence hunter than to be a shopper at Ralph's? So one funny thing about this is that these cows get to graze in pastures too. They don't spend their whole lives in the feedlot. And that's not such a bad life. So, and they wouldn't live it. They wouldn't be possible for them if they weren't going to be harvested, because no one is going to raise cows so that they can grow old and die.
Responsible for, finding food and going out instead of working or doing anything which we would consider productive or
Yes.
research or whatever, going out and looking for nuts and berries and sheep. That would be crazy.
There could not be 8 billion of us on this planet. There would not be enough room. So In fact, I don't know what people think the pre-agriculture population of the world was, but I think it's thought to only be a few tens of millions of people. So I think, yeah, not very many, because agriculture just resulted in a huge explosion. Maybe it's a little more than that. I shouldn't make up numbers I don't really know about. Oh, less, you think? Well, when we came out of Africa, for sure, 200,000 years ago, there were many, many fewer of us. The reason I hesitate and think that might have been more is that I've seen studies that show that in most of Africa, the taking of game animals and harvesting of wild fruits and roots and so on resulted in more calories than currently can be gotten out of farming and raising of domestic animals. Yes.
Yeah, I looked it up and the internet says that it's 5 to 10 million people before agriculture became a thing.
5 to 10
pretty
million
right.
before agriculture. Okay, thank you. That seems pretty believable. Yes, Jim.
Much greater diversity of human beings.
Ah,
The skin color, but many other features,
yeah,
which is a good indication that's where human life began,
yeah,
evolved.
yes. Yeah. That may also be affected by people being somewhat separated for a long time. Yes. That's right. And then we have the Maasai, who are very tall. Yes. I've forgotten the name for the other people, not the pygmies, but the people who live in the Kalahari Desert. Anyway, they're, I think, thought to be the most genetically divergent. Yet, of course, they're still completely human and seem to have all the cognitive capabilities of every other human, of course. And there's been a little bit of mixing up over the centuries too. Bill's also interested in the personification. Oh, oh no, it's fine. Personification of computers, which I think is interesting. And it's true that I think particularly when we're frustrated by them, we sometimes have a tendency to think that they're trying to thwart us. That computers are sometimes trying to thwart us. Yes, they are. And when we're sensible, we realize that computers are made by humans. But when we're dealing with them and they seem to be deliberately difficult, we sometimes don't attribute it to programming error, but rather to intention.
Science.
People who think that way don't understand any science. Don't understand what they're talking about. Yeah, I think many people who feel that way momentarily, if they're asked, oh, do you really think this thing is trying to frustrate you? They would say, no, of course not. As a lazy programmer, it didn't do their job very well. And yes, kick the tire because the car won't start. Yeah. Yeah. But that's, again, it's like the blue ball that we attribute decision-making to. So it's a very powerful tendency that maybe the people who never do this are like really weirdly overeducated to think so logically about the world. Over.
Most people in the rest of the world, that's why Bill is not anybody. you know, he's unique.
Yeah.
And he might be very, very smart. However, it's hard for the rest of us to catch up with him.
Yeah.
And it makes you feel like you're looking at a computer.
Yeah.
Instead of a human being, you know what I mean?
Yeah. You don't agree with it. So Mary.
Well, I was just going to say that, I mean, as people, the only way we can approach the world is what we see or what we think we see. So I think the personification is just a natural result of being human.
Yeah.
We've got to kind of look at the world through the lens of what we kind of know. And what we know more than most things is people. You know what I mean? Because, you know, for things like computers, I mean, I have no idea how a computer works. I mean, I know a little bit about it, but not enough to do anything with it. Yeah, exactly. I know enough to want to throw it across the room when it's not working,
Yeah.
but that's about it. Anyways.
So I think our brains actually evolved with a lot of very specialized capabilities that you don't find in a computer, because it's a very general purpose piece of hardware. Sometimes it's got a special chip for doing math and a special chip for doing graphics. Go ahead, Jim.
Just responding to Mary, most of what you're talking about is the software. The hardware just does what it's told, what the software tells it to do.
But our hardware is particularly unusual when we think about the model of a general purpose computer, in that we've got a special part in our brains. Different parts of our brains do different aspects of visual analysis. So in the back, in the occipital lobe, we've got a map that kind of corresponds to what we're seeing, and that's where we seem to do image detection. But there's another part closer to the midbrain that does image location. So where things are is figured out in a different place from what things are, with very different brain structures. Not one big non-specialized computational system. Yes, Jim?
What part of our brain deals with language? And can you talk to that?
It too is spread out, interestingly. Now, actually, maybe I should ask Pam about this. So yeah, I'm not an expert either. I did take a psycholinguistics course, but probably they figured out more since 45 years ago, 55 years ago. So some of it's done in the temporal lobes, and particularly for most people in the left temporal lobe. This may be related to the fact that we're right-handed and the left part of the brain handles the right part of the body and so on. But there are other areas where higher cognitive functions associated with language are done in the forebrain. Again, a very interesting thing is that there are all these different specialized things. There's special parts of the brain that try to figure out where the sound is coming. Other parts that are parsing out the sounds to try to figure out whether this is an S or a Z, and that's currently being spoken. And other parts that are putting the sounds together to make words, and other parts that are putting the words together to make coherent ideas expressed in sentences. And then there are still other parts that work on relating what is being figured out about that to what is going on in the world right now. That's called pragmatics. So again, we've got a whole lot of specialized structures. And the reason I started mentioning this is that we can't help but use all of this specialized hardware that we got to process the world as we go around. Well, a lot of it, what we got, because we are a social animal that needs to succeed, to be able to mate and propagate and everything, we have to be able to deal with other people, understand their motivations, and weasel our way into their lives and whatnot. We've got all that mechanism to understand the intention of others and everything. And we may over apply it sometimes until we're applying it to blue balls. I should have picked green instead because we're talking about blue balls. That's a very odd. Anyway, yeah, whatever. So yes, Pam.
I think it was Rich, the first day that Bill talked, asked a question about animism. And I think maybe now is the time to bring that up because clearly it's, we think of this as sort of primitive mental exercise,
Yeah.
but it's clearly very important. And maybe what we do with the red balls and such is another feature of that.
Yeah. Okay, this is a really good point. It's not likely that the first religious experience that people ever had took place only 10,000 years ago in Turkey when they built this temple. I think hunter-gatherers had all kinds of religious experiences. And one reason to expect this is that if people went 50 years ago into Indonesia and started talking to hunter-gatherers who had never met people from the so-called civilized world, they had all kinds of beliefs, and some of them were very important to them. And we know about this sort of thing from our contact with so-called primitive peoples through the centuries. And there have been people who studied things like this in an academic way from the 17th century on. And we have a tendency sometimes to say, oh, that's just animism. That's not a real religion. But I think the people who went to the sacred spring to commune with the goddess who provides the clean water that everyone in the group drinks at when our tribe is spending the months of November and December near this spring, they had religious experiences. I feel confident. So some people would say that a temple with its towering columns is really just a phony forest. And that the same feelings of awe that you might get being in the midst of these great columns, you could also have being in the midst of the great pillars, trees of a beautiful grove in a forest. So I just think saying maybe that Turkish temple was the birth of one kind of religion. But I don't think it was the birth of religion. I think there were sacred things. 2 weeks ago, the question is, what temple is this? 2 weeks ago, Bill talked about a book about the discovery of a 10 or 12,000 year old temple. I've forgotten the exact numbers in Turkey. Yes, thank you. Which may be the first religious building ever built. Has these very tall pillars. That's right. And with various somewhat abstracted humanoid figures carved into the pillars and so on, which might represent gods. And this was particularly exciting because it had previously been thought that religious life based on big buildings like this could not have happened before there was agriculture, because you would need the wealth of agriculture to support a large number of people in a small area who could build and maintain a temple like this. And in fact, the evidence suggests that the people who did this, because they were still hunter-gatherers, were managing on fewer calories than they needed, and they shrank and they got sick and they died younger. But it was worth it because they got religion out of it, maybe, or why would they have done it? So But that's not the beginning, I think. That's not the beginning of religious thought, religious experience. It's just the beginning of large groups of people having that experience. And that was, of course, a marked step forward. You get a bunch of people together chanting or singing, and it can result in spiritual feelings like we might get singing in church ourselves. And that's a value to us. Maybe trying to win favor sometimes, maybe sometimes just sort of exulting in God's presence in our lives, just as people might have exulted in the presence of the spirit of the sacred spring. So we can, I think this tendency to sometimes be able to experience a feeling of something special, not motivated by immediate material gain, but just to appreciate that may be an important aspect of religious experience. Pardon me?
This is me talking, not in my opinion. Rather than using the word God, when some unaccountable events happen, either that have positive or negative, positive meaning joy, or negative meaning fear for survival. When those kind of events happened, I suspect that the humans in that community wanted to make some impression upon God by means of permanent structures. That's, for what it's worth.
That could be. Certainly, I think the building of the cathedrals in 12th century France had some elements of that. I know. But I'm saying that things that are core to the human experience probably repeat in various times and places. So good point. One other thing we might talk about that Bill is interested in is, does anybody have some great ideas about other discussion type events that we might hold in ADG? And especially if one of us has an ambition to lead a discussion on a topic, that would be interesting to know about. But don't worry, you can rope someone else into doing it if you've got a good idea and don't want to lead yourself. Has anybody been harboring a wish for a certain type of discussion? Let's ask him.
I'd like to know one about microfinancing.
Microfinance. Oh, what a good idea.
I don't know any. I want to learn about it.
Yes.
I've started reading about it, but
So Pam asks,
like other people to help.
what does microfinance mean? Asks Pam.
I don't know. I think it's helping others.
Is it
share
like
with-
micro loans like they do in India? Is that one aspect of microfinance? So there are
That's what I
companies
mean.
that make very small loans. It's when they're repaid, then they make more small loans. Yes.
I believe that's part of it.
Okay. And Jim, you just said. Okay. You've got a book, and it sounds like Sheila's been reading about it too. So first I thought maybe we need to bring in an expert, but maybe.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Sheila, didn't you talk to us about this a couple of years ago?
I think that I certainly haven't been able to follow through as much as I like.
Well, I just remember you and Alan were talking about
Yeah, I
going on
got
with this
excited
idea.
about it when you talked about it.
Yeah, we were talking about it. I never followed through.
Okay.
Okay.
I have another suggestion, not to do with microfinance. Jim, I would like to hear more about this book that was mentioned in the preview that you have about the history of the church property. Would you be willing to talk to us about that from that book? Because it sounded very interesting.
Yes. The book was just published in the last a few months ago. It was written, it is a history of the first 10 years of Miracosta. And the period that preceded that would be the groundswell during World War II and after World War II, a population here in the South Bay for which there were need for schools. And so there was a Japanese farmer, truck farmer, he raised decorative plants like camellias and things of that sort. And he had that area for that purpose. And after World War II, when there was a strong demand in 1946, typically, to have a high school, Miracosta wanted that land, and he sold it, and a chunk of it, and all the way up to Peck, from Rosecrans to Peck. So the church property was included. Our church property was included in that bundle of land. I can bring the book and I can show you how to get the book, and we could very easily bring in the writer of the book, the author of the book. That he'd do a much better job than I would by a long shot.
That's a great idea.
And he lives probably within about 3 or 4 blocks of this church.
Oh, excellent. Yeah.
Sounds pretty interesting to me.
An editor of it was what's the doctor, the professor? What's wrong with me? Member of our church, Gary Harsel. Yes, Gary Harsel wrote the foreword or or the equivalent of the book. He would be the right one to bring in. I mean, he is a graduate of it.
Yeah.
And Gary Harsel is your person.
Okay.
Or the author himself.
Yeah.
And I think the author would be quite willing to come in.
Good. That might really make sense. We could maybe.
For those of you who have not seen the book, I'll bring it into next Sunday ADG.
All right. On January 8th. So to
yeah.
repeat to what we said earlier.
Well, by then I will have forgotten it.
All right.
I'll try to. So January, we're not having a session until January 8th. Well, for obvious reasons. Okay. That's of course.
Well, maybe I'll send an email to Gary Hartzell asking him about this, what he
tell you
thinks
what,
about
it
this.
might be more beneficial. I left the book in the church office intentionally, and I asked, and we wrote. I wound up writing an announcement that the book was in the office for those who want to view it. Okay, but the book is no longer in the office.
Oh,
but just a minute. Would it be beneficial to have it in the office?
well,
Let me know
Yeah,
what you'd like. The book I have a book. The book costs $30. We can get other copies, and the author of the book is here in Manhattan Beach.
yeah.
He could sell you more. Rather than
How
me
about
being,
leaving it in the church office with Nancy for the time being?
I did do that a couple weeks ago after I announced it. It got it announced in the preview.
So this was just recently that you said it was in the church office.
Yes.
okay.
In the last month or two.
Oh,
What's your pleasure? First of all, we ought to get
What's
Gary
the name
Harsel
of the book?
or the author to come in and talk about it.
Yeah. Well, that's a good idea. We'll work on it. Thanks.
Okay.
All right. Any other ideas for discussions or other programs? All right. Yeah. You have an announcement?
Well, sort of. On my news feed today, there was an article on.
Point the
HuffPost.
microphone in.
Oh, sorry. On the news feed, on my news feed on my phone today, there was an article on the HuffPost. And I know I sound like a broken record, but the title was, I was taught not to tell anyone I was Jewish. Here's what happened when I finally did. It's by a guy named Jeff Dingler. So if you want to look for it, you can find it. He said, this is what he says initially. I'm not going to read the whole article. I already knew the litany. Don't go to synagogue. Don't put your names on any lists. Don't tell anyone you're Jewish. The recent antics of the unlikely trifecta of former President Trump, world's richest man, Elon Musk, and superstar rapper Ye, formerly Kanye West, have proven once again that being Jewish in America is complicated. This isn't news to us. Anti-Semitic incidents in the U.S. have been rising for years, hit an all-time high in 2021. Just under a year ago, on the morning of January 15th, a gunman held 4 people hostage in a small town Texan synagogue. I wasn't shocked. I wasn't even surprised. When you're Jewish, you come to expect this. So what I would suggest is there's a lot of stuff going on in the South Bay in the next week because it's Hanukkah. Tonight is the beginning of Hanukkah. And so I just thought we might want to, either as a group, people get together or individually go to some of these events just to support the community. So just FYI, here's some of what's going on. Join the largest Hanukkah celebration in town at the Hermosa Beach Pier Plaza. That's today at 3:30. Events include gifts for kids, kids activities, etc. Hot latkes, donuts. Anyways, there's a lot of stuff there. Then there's a grand menorah lighting
3 p.m.
celebration.
3 p.m. Did you say?
3:30.
3:30.
And then there's a grand menorah lighting celebration at Metlock's Plaza on Tuesday at 5 o'clock. There's a menorah lighting ceremony actually at various places. At Redondo Beach Civic Center on Tuesday, December 20th at 5:30. At Manhattan Village Shopping Center Outdoor Plaza on Wednesday, December 21st at 5:30, and at the El Segundo City Hall on Thursday, December 22nd at 5:30. And there's actually on the 24th that you can skate around a giant menorah at the Toyota King's Training Center. So anyways, just some ideas of things that we might be able to do to support or to show support for the local people.
Thanks, Mary.
Find that list.
Going back to Mary, going back to the beginning of your bit, you said this person did not want people to know he was Jewish. What was his last name? Okay. All right, so it was not obviously Jewish. It was not obviously a Jewish name. Okay, I thought I misheard you.
And Mary said, and when she was off the mic, that Sheila, if you want the list, email her and she'll send it back to you.
Yeah, I would love to have that list.
Okay.
I may join you. If you go to one of these, let me know. I'm trying to figure out which one would have the best parking. That's really the major consideration for me.
Thinking about the one at 3:30 today.
Yeah.
So, but I generally am Zooming with my little nieces at 4. So I've got to check that out first, but that would be one that, and I can usually figure out parking for Hermosa, or if you don't mind walking a few blocks, and I could pick you up if you want.
Okay. Well, that's, yeah. Oh. Okay.
So I have tons of Jewish friends, and one of them, she stopped doing that. One couple used to have a Hanukkah party, you know, for every day they light the candle
Wow.
to invite all their friends over. But they stopped doing it.
That's too bad.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of fear out there. Just the things that I'm hearing is that, and I don't know that much, but I think people are really afraid to go to synagogue. And that's just, that's so un-American. That's just not what it should be.
And it's not just affecting Jewish people. I've got my Chinese relatives that are being affected. It's going across borders. It's, you know, like people got tired of, I think, Black people complaining, but now I think just about every ethnicity has reason to be concerned.
Yeah.
And culture and religion and gender.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just awful.
And I just
But on
heard
the other hand, I
yesterday.
think-
Oh,
On the
I
other
just-
hand, I think we have come a long way, and people are aware that people are not just complaining that these things actually happen to people, and it'd be serious.
Yes.
I just heard on the radio, I think, or news, something, I think yesterday, that anti-Semitic attacks have increased something like 121%. I don't hold that number, but it was really just astoundingly high. And that's in the last couple of years. So it's, you know, I think personally, I just feel very strongly that we need to take a stand as Christians. We need to stand up against this.
There were 660 something mass shootings in this country this year.
Yeah.
Over 660,
Mhm.
like 663.
Like 2 a day.
And mass shooting being defined as at least 4 people, I think, got shot.
I think the
Anyway.
LA Times is doing a good job of pointing out a lot of these things that are going on, and they seem to have really, I mean, there's seems to be at least 2 or 3 articles in the paper every day about sort of the injustices that are being faced.
Yes. Well, Sunday, I mean, at the Sunday service today, we've got a really big show. So I want everybody to be able to get there. So I think we should call a halt to this now. Don't come next week. Don't come the week after, but be sure to come 3 weeks from now on January 8th.
Just one more thing, if you can continue to keep Barbara Wells in your prayers. It's my understanding that she got moved to a different hospital. She's recovering, I think, from COVID. So just remember her in your prayers.
Okay.
She's here every Sunday.
Thank you, everybody. And are the previous 2 Sundays, because I wasn't able to be here the last 2 Sundays, are they in the archives or something?
Yes.
Yes, Kevin is recording.
Yeah, they all should be recorded in the archives already.
Thank you.
I will check with Nick today, but they should be, if not now, soon, they should be online.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Bye.
Merry Christmas.
Oh.